Good morning. This is Giles Edwards from 366 Weird Movies, and I am sitting down remotely with the two creative forces behind Country of Hotels, and they're going to introduce themselves.
My name's Julio Maria Martino. I'm the director of Country of Hotels. Thanks for having us.
And I'm David Hauptschein, and I wrote the screenplay.
Well, welcome, and thank you both very much for taking time in your spare rooms, living rooms, or wherever you have found yourselves right now. And I recently watched not just your latest movie, but it looks like for both of you, is it your first movie to speak of? I was looking at the IMDb credits for each of you, and it seems you were...
To all intents and purposes, that's correct. David, a while ago, made a very dense 10-minute long stop motion animation film called Fecundation. In the 80s this was, but in terms of feature films, this is our first jump in the ocean.
Okay, and I know from the very brief research again, you both are involved in theater primarily. Is that true?
That's correct. I've directed around 9 of David's plays. We met about 20 years ago, and a few years ago we decided we'd like to explore the dimensions we've been working in cinema. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I eventually persuaded David to take that plunge with me.
I guess I'll start with a sort of general question that you can both elaborate on as much as you care to. What was it that first brought you to theater, and then maybe some specifics about why it was you wanted to do this particular project on film?
David, do you want to start on the theater story, and then
it's sort of a long string. I mean, it would take too long to get into all the weird twists and turns of how I got into theater. I started off as a visual artist, and I developed some weird eye problems, which I'm not going to elaborate on now. I have normal vision, but I have trouble doing eye straining activities. So I got into performance art, and then that sort of led me to write plays and do theater. But I have to say that if when I was 20 years old, you tell me I become a playwright, it would have seemed impossible. So weird twists and turns in life have been sort of the hallmark of my artistic career. And as far as getting into film, Julio and I were kicking around some ideas for doing a short film. And as usual, I always take on more than I can handle. And I said, well, I'd do a short film if we could do a feature. And he said, all right, let's do a feature. And so that's where we went.
Yeah, I have always been interested in theatre and film. I found theatre easier to get into because obviously it costs less money to put on a play, and I became heavily involved with that for many years. I'm still very, very interested in it. But parallel to that, I always had ambitions to direct and make films. My father and uncle used to run a number of video VHS rental stores when I was a child. I think I almost convinced them to do that because they were running chip shops, pizza restaurants, what have you. And there was a sort of low point in, their business lives. And I was sort of nudging age 11, 12 years old. What about a video VHS rental shop? And somehow that happened. And during that period, I watched a galactic number of films with, my family and in the back of the video shop. And that really started me off on sort of film watching and film exploring in a way that sort of never ended. My only regret in terms of all of this is that, I didn't start making films earlier. I felt like I needed to sort of make that, start that journey with someone like David. And it took a couple of years of convincing, I think, and then a couple of years of preparation before we embarked upon it.
Oh, great. And I guess just one more deep history question. How did you two end up meeting those years ago?
Yeah, I was at university at Manchester, and I was acting in a play at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and a friend called Joe Monk bought me a ticket to see a play called Trance, which had just won an award or was just about to win an award. And I went to see this play, and it was sort of tangentially about the Charles Manson family murders, but not directly, more about a girl having visions of these murders and then them becoming real. And it was about midway through the play, and I began to feel very, very uneasy, as if I wanted to leave the theatre. I felt like I was having some sort of weird vertigo sitting in the theatre, and I came out and I thought, who could have written this really sick, disturbing play? And it stayed with me for a number of days, and then in fact a number of years. And I think 4 or 5 years later, I was still thinking about it. And it was the early days of the internet, early-ish days. I think it was 1999, 2000. I started doing searches via Google in sort of really smelly internet cafes for who'd written this play. And I finally got in touch with one of the actors, who put me in touch with David, and we began corresponding. He sent me this play Trance and some of his other plays. And I was in two minds at that point, because I thought maybe it was just a freak occurrence that I'd, been and got food poisoning or something. But I read the play and I thought, no, there's something really going on here. And within a couple of years, I directed one of his plays in London. He invited me to Chicago to direct one of his plays, and we began this journey of collaboration together.
Does that sync up with your memories, David?
Kind of, yeah, it does. It's kind of like that butterfly thing. I forget how that goes, a butterfly wing, butterfly dies and it creates its, no, but if you think back on the sequence of events, probably meeting Julio is, other than maybe meeting my wife, the most important single thing in my life. And
oh my God.
but I have an interesting thought here, Julio. So I think back on the events that led to my meeting Julio. First, it was meeting a director in Chicago who then wanted to take the play to Edinburgh. A whole bunch of things happened. It almost fell apart. One guy saved the thing. We finally got to Edinburgh. Then Julio just happens to be watching it. And I don't think, actually, if you follow the course of events, Julio, I've never mentioned this, I don't think you'd be married now if it wasn't for me either, because you met your wife at something that you and I had put together in London. So it's one of these weird, it's like if one day I had made a left turn instead of a right turn, who knows where I'd be now, and the same, this is an example of how my mind works, and it's why, I need to kind of tamp it down.
Oh, no, I personally can attest to the importance of being open to circumstance and chance, because the reasons I'm here are also long and involved, but this isn't about me, so I will spare you that for now anyway.
David has a very good phrase relating to this, which is, if in doubt, go out. And it's really, if you're in doubt about whether you should accept that ticket to the play, whether you should go out and do something. And our society's always telling us these days to stay indoors, and obviously for very good reasons at the moment, but beyond the pandemic, before it and after it, there's an increasing march towards believing that you can get everything from your living room, and all experiences can be ported into your living room. And this will not generally lead to too much exciting happening. And so, I was glad I went out that night, certainly, yeah.
And it even applies to us making this movie, never having made a movie before, making a feature length. It's like, let's just go out. Let's do it. We can do it, and it worked.
Well, and that's a good segue to this questions about this movie, Country of Hotels. What was the seed that started this idea? Because it's a movie about travelers, but it all takes place in one location. What started this story or group of stories for you both?
Yeah.
Well, you want to start, Julio?
No,
Go
you
ahead.
go, David. No.
Basically, one day I was speaking with Julio, I think we're on the phone, and he was telling me about a scene he saw somewhere in a movie. I forget what movie it was even, but it had to do with a guy. He's in a hotel room and there's a knock on the door, and it's somebody he's never met who's basically harassing him. And I just thought, well, wait a minute, that's not a bad idea. Let's have a guy who's had a drunk blackout wake up in a woman's room. The woman's not there, and he doesn't know how he got there. And then there's a knock on his door, and the creepy guy comes in
with comb over and bolo tie.
Yeah, with a bolo tie, which, by the way, is my signature. I usually wear a bolo tie, like you wear your bow tie. Anyway, so and then I wrote that episode. And I call it an episode because it wasn't a full-length movie. And at that point, we were still thinking of the short film. This is a great idea. This room could have like a presence. And so then I came up with the other two stories, working, of course, all along with Julio. I mean, I would write things, but then he would read them and we'd go back and forth, so it was always a collaborative effort.
Yeah, and I think that we realized that we weren't going to have a huge amount of money to make this film, and that also we weren't going to find, a conventional producer to make this film, production company, that no one in their right minds would be giving us a serious amount of money to make a film. And so what we decided is if we could create a set of very sort of enclosed locations, 2 or 3 locations, plus the TV, which contains a number of other minor locations.
Yeah.
We could create an enclosed universe, a bit like Sartre's Huis Clos or a Samuel Beckett play or a Harold Pinter play, obviously filmically, but we could create this enclosed environment. And there's a big history of enclosed environment films as well, where we could artistically control as much of the action as possible. So there were both sort of like philosophical artistic considerations as well as practical considerations. Once David had got the 3 central stories of the film, we then decided we wanted to build up the world of the hotel a bit more. And this is where we came up with this idea of the hotel staff, who act as a kind of subplot, weaving through the stories and bring them all together. And David was saying at this point, I don't want to write any more dialogue. I'm sick of, all this writing more dialogue. And based on that, we came up with the idea that the hotel staff speak in an undecipherable foreign language. And that really tied into the idea of the title of the film, Country of Hotels. This is about strangers in a strange land. The hotel guests are these strangers in this land, and the land, the world of the hotel, is like an unknowable universe. It has metaphysical connotations as well. But I think that's a sort of basic overview of how we came up with the idea.
Oh, good. Yeah, because the staff, and each of the vignettes have a number of high points I quite enjoyed, but my favorite element was the staff interactions. I thought that they were very wonderfully fleshed out, especially the sort of main staff member, Sammy, with who is of, as you said, considerable metaphysical importance. In regards to the piece of wall art that graces the room 508. I guess while I'm saying 508, it's probably an outside chance. Is there any significance to that number, or is it just something that you liked?
Well, David came up with a number. I think he might have a separate answer for this, but I'll say my interpretation, and David maybe might want to say something. But I say, we didn't make a film where there were clues to be deciphered like that. And I know from the way you posed the question, you suspecting that. But what I'd say is, in crafting the film, both in the writing and then the directing, and then in the editing and the post-production, what became clear to me anyway is we wanted to create a world where you would leave the film and maybe ask that question, but maybe the only person that has the answer to that question, really, you might suspect, is Sammy and the hotel staff. They hold the key to that. They know what's behind the door that's never opened in the film, so to speak. They have the answers to the hidden meanings in the film. David.
Well, what Julio just said about what's behind the door that's never opened, that would be my guiding phrase in as an artist, which is that I do not want to tell the audience what to think. I don't want to hammer home, especially social issues. I want the audience to be part of the creative process. And actually, when we're working, that's something I bring up a lot to the actors. Although I'm not the director, and it's a minor point, but it's my presence is sort of minor compared to Julio's. That is something I say. It's like I'm handing you the baton. Now you bring your creativity to it. And I want the audience to do that too. Now, that's not to say I'm trying to make something that is like artsy fartsy obscure where you need like a pamphlet to understand it. I'm just saying, and I'm not going to hammer home, obvious kinds of things, and we're not going to have wavy lines to indicate this is now a dream. If we enter into sort of an alternate reality or a dream reality, you're going to have to decide for yourself if you're there. And that's kind of, and to me, the mystery is everything. It's like, I don't even want to, sometimes I'd rather not know exactly what it means. That's why I love David Lynch so much, because who knows what Mulholland Drive really means? It means a lot, but you can't write it out.
Right. Yeah. There's good ambiguity. And yeah, I think that's achieved in Country of Hotels. And yeah, there's obviously sloppy ambiguity, which I won't name the titles now, just out of respect to the people involved with those. But yeah, as the nature of our website suggests, we are looking for weird things. We are looking for unexplainable things. We're looking for things with multiple interpretations. And that's why I felt so like happy and satisfied when encountering something like this, because these movies aren't made too often, because by design, their appeal is going to be kind of narrow, because lots of people want to know what's going on. And other people are happy not knowing quite what's going on. And, I say that with more of the focus on the mystery viewer is going to be the person satisfied by this, as opposed to the mainstream kind of thing. There's there are different audiences for different movies, and this movie is going to attract people like us and people like those who read our website. And those are all good things. So I know that probably came out a little bit awkwardly, but
no, that's
not at all.
What you said there is really what we, I'm not just saying this, but it's what we hope to hear. And I don't think it's an easy thing to find, because for me, it's enough to try and explain to someone that, listen, you don't have to understand everything. You can have an incredibly powerful dream or nightmare that will stay with you for days after it happens. And the question is this experience persuasive in the way that a nightmare or a dream might be persuasive, or a strange encounter with a person who may seem to be one thing, and during the course of the conversation manifest themselves as something else. And if that manifestation, that transformation is persuasive, it can be a very, very unusual experience. And what we're trying to do is create experiences on that level. But a lot of people, a lot of critics, a lot of audience members, a lot of people in the business want answers for things. And the bargain basement of explanation is political and social interpretation. I like a lot of political cinema from the 70s and 80s, but it was a time when art was allowed to be a bit more complex. And we've entered an age where you put a film out like Country of Hotels and people say, well, are annoyed that there isn't an answer to those things. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, because if I were to describe this, and I sort of do in the review, these are kind of like fairy tales. You have your three fairy tales, and within it you have that anchoring. You said you don't know where the family's from. It's not ever really specified, but there's definitely to me anyway, a very Eastern European flair to them. One of those
Yeah.
ancient, Hutu families. Sammy even remarks the thousands-year history of whatever homeland he's got.
Yeah.
And so you have these encounters that are dealing with very not basic, but maybe primal kinds of things. You have the adulterers, you have the Polly, and I'm going to get back to him because I found him particularly interesting. And then you have the odd encounter, which apparently was the first scenario that you, David, thought of, with the guy waking up really drunk in the hotel room and a stranger comes, kind of thing. And it's all their fates are kind of decided by what they're doing, obviously made worse by the fact that they're in room 508 where that kind of thing can happen. But it's very much, I felt very much a fairy tale kind of feel to the whole setup there in a modern way.
Yeah, I think the way I described it, I don't think David would necessarily agree with my interpretation of this, although we've discussed it. But in talking to the actors and the crew, I used the term purgatory, and I described it as the setting is purgatorial, and each of the characters, the main characters in the three sections, they come to 508 and they meet their reckoning in one way or another. And I don't think there's necessarily a religious view of purgatory, but more of an existential one. But that was the way that I saw it when I was directing it, in a way, and providing an easy shorthand for someone to understand. And I think your use of the fairy tale is another way to do that, and it's a very helpful way of getting a hook onto the film. And if you were to watch it again at some point, you might find that view developing or changing or shifting some way. I think David would probably have another way of speaking about it, but I completely identify with the way you describe it there.
Well, do you, David, or are you good with what we're talking about?
I'm perfectly happy with everything you guys are saying. It doesn't contradict anything I think. For me, it's more of a kind of a dream reality or nightmare reality, which is as real as waking reality. I mean, we sleep, we experiencing. I mean, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I do is say to myself, oh, that was just a dream. Thank God I won't have to deal with that today, And it takes me, I'm not a morning person, and it takes me about a half hour to an hour to just get all this noise from the night out of my head so I can begin to function. And what I wanted to do was create something that had a little bit of that feel, to put the viewer in that state. And stories can be told. There's a language, and different cultures have different ways of understanding stories. And Julio and I are at the point where, and I'm not saying we're tremendously innovative, but we're trying to work on a slightly altered version of what a good story is compared to what you might see in commercial cinema or traditional fiction. And so yeah, it doesn't follow the strict pattern laid out by convention, but it is just as valid and just as real. It's just I was trying to tap into more kind of the subconscious, the stuff going on beneath. We all have a subconscious that's roiling at all times. Some people are very good at repressing it. Some people never think about death or don't worry much about it. Other people, it's right up there. For me, it's bubbling up all the time. My subconscious is always sticking its ugly head up. And, so I wanted to tell a story where the head was sticking up. Hey, I'm here. Yeah, you can't escape me. That kind of thing. Now, does that answer your question? Is that
my question? Oh, well,
am I being clear?
Oh no, I think these are all very good explanations about what's going on there, and obviously all have a bit of interrelation with each other. So I think that's a-okay. I guess I'll take things back a little bit for just a couple simple questions. I noticed it, and my colleague who founded the site that I work for also caught his eye. The wallpaper in room 508. If one of you might be able to elaborate a little on the inspiration and the desired effect from that.
Yeah, I can talk about that. We were about to. It's a rather dull answer, I'm afraid. We were. This film was made on a very low budget, and it was shot in a warehouse of where we had only part of the warehouse of about 200 square feet, and we had about 10 days before filming was about to start. The set was being built, and the production manager said to me, "Look, these are the wallpapers we can get." And the best one was the one that I picked, which had a timeless quality. It's kind of brown, kind of red, and it has like a puzzle element.
Yeah.
And it also does, quite visibly seem to echo the carpet in The Shining.
Okay, yeah, that was.
Which is I suspect what you're getting to. That is a sort of decision that sort of is made, knowing we sort of said, right, well, we're going down that avenue now. We didn't try to make a film where you would sort of say, this is a quote from The Shining, this is a quote from Mulholland Drive or something like that, because we're not really interested in that kind of thing. But I totally recognize that that is what is in the film now, and it's evident, and we use it on the poster. If someone talks about it, I'm more than happy to talk about it. I certainly didn't watch The Shining like before. I've seen it a few times, but I didn't watch The Shining anywhere near filming, and I haven't watched it since, simply because I didn't want to be influenced. I mean, Kubrick's so totemic that for directors, and if you're making a film in a hotel, even more so,
Right.
that I didn't really want to be sort of quoting directly from The Shining. But I think when you ever make a film in, a hotel is a very, very, very evocative location. It's evocative not just in cinema, but in literature and in music and all sorts of things. And as soon as you sort of enter a location like that and create it, and you're talking about sort of hidden meanings and hidden imprints, shadows of things which have gone but are still there, you set off a chain of references and echoes which are going to be picked up. So we welcome it, but my honest answer is it wasn't sort of something we planned from long ago, putting pieces in place, but just working with the limitations of what we've got is the answer. Yeah.
I'd like to add a little something to that. I've noticed from reviews for this film, and also reviews for my plays, that reviewers and maybe people in general, they're continually looking to find a pin to stick into the movie that connects to something else in the world that has been created like it. And sometimes it's meaningful, sometimes it's not. I'm certainly not, like I mentioned, David Lynch. I'm not trying to hide influences. Samuel Beckett, Sam Shepard, the playwright, Harold Pinter. These are all my influences. In no way, I'm happy that they're in my influences. That's how art is made. But a lot of times people come up, like I wasn't even aware of I saw The Shining in 1981 or something, and I wasn't even aware this wallpaper had anything to do with The Shining until long after the film was made. And I'm not, and some of the connections that are being made, like the Barton Fink, seem kind of superficial, it's another example of not dealing directly with the world we've created and looking for some other way to explain it. And I don't know, it doesn't seem all that useful, in a way. I don't know, I'm losing my train of thought here, but carry on.
No, I think you have a good point there. I do know from casual scientific reading that people always try to make sense of something, even if they shouldn't or indeed can't. And so these comparatives, like you just mentioned with the Barton Fink thing, I actually make a very offhand remark about the Hotel Earl in my own review, just to give a sort of comparative kind of look. I don't tie it to the movie, but it's the kind of thing that can give an impression to, say, a reader of my review, what sort of feel they might expect, because if they're readers of our site, they're almost necessarily going to have seen Barton Fink, and that means they're almost necessarily going to be thinking it anyway.
I'd say Barton Fink's a closer, is closer to the mood of this film than The Shining anyway, in the sense that, Barton Fink has that existentialist universe atmosphere and isn't relying on the banner of horror film to sort of guide its audience. Whereas I think the danger with The Shining comparison for me, and this is purely just as a filmmaker selling a film, really, the danger of The Shining comparison for me has been that we don't have a man with an axe running through the hotel, and there are no limbs flying anywhere, and there's no one being chopped apart as there is in many horror films these days, and we're actually existing in more of the dream world that David described. And I think actually Barton Fink in that sense is quite a nice comparison. For what it's worth, that is a film that I studied a bit before we shot the film, but it's a minefield, actually, influences, I find. So yeah, it's interesting to talk about anyway.
And it's sort of like, and it's the kind of thing that I imagine you can't help, because you've perceived these things, like you said, David, you are influenced by those playwrights because they're ones that you watch performances of, studied, and so on. And so there's, these things are going to be kind of built in, whether or not we want to have them there in the first place. But yeah, I say the guy with the axe, I'm trying to think, the only piece of on-screen violence I remember from Country of Hotels happens when someone actually just trips.
Yeah, there's around that moment you see a bloody image for a few seconds, and someone else has an unfortunate accident with a piece of furniture.
Yeah,
but those are actually the only moments. There's a few brief seconds of violence. Yeah. We've often remarked, if we'd had a few dead bodies, chopped up in cupboards in the film, I think it would be it wouldn't be as good a film in a way, because I think it would be cheating, but it would be an easier film to sell, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that's interesting, and I don't want to give a spoiler here in terms of anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet, but mostly when someone dies, they just disappear. I mean, people vanish. And it rather than to show the violence of how they vanish, they just go. And if you think about death, to come back to ongoing,
one of your favorite topics, yeah,
one of my favorite topics. But this year, I'm getting a little older, and more and more friends of mine are dying. And what strikes me is not how they died, just that they're gone, they're vanished, they don't exist physically in the world. And I find that, I haven't yet adjusted to that, and I don't think I will. But, in a way, that's kind of, more powerful. It's like, wow, I can't call Joe anymore. He's gone. And, it's so, rather than to rely on really sort of obvious visceral thrills, we move more toward psychological things. And, I think it's more powerful in a way.
Yeah, I'd agree, because there would be a nasty way to do this, and that wouldn't necessarily be without its charm. But the more existentialist, purgatory, fairy tale route fits certainly very well for me, because I've had the mixed blessing of seeing plenty of violent things in my tenure as a reviewer for 366 here. I guess while I'm on me, just very briefly, Paulie, I think he might be my favorite character. He's absolutely fascinating. He sort of does a one-man show kind of bit as the middle story there. And I'm going to ask about him a bit further after this, but when he's reeling off a list of locations that he's visited, one of them is Latham, New York. Why Latham, New York? I live near Latham, New York. Nobody lives near Latham, New York. How did that end up on screen for me to see?
That's funny. Okay, first of all, this shows my writing style or my writing method. Okay, I'm in Chicago, and I basically just pick names out of a hat randomly, and there was no significance. I
Okay.
just liked the sound of it, and the names I listed, I probably have never been. Palatine, where the movie takes place,
Right, that too.
which is Palatine is famous for one reason: the brown chicken murders. Now, you might be a little young to remember those, but about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there was a grisly murder at a Brown's Chicken where like 5 people were found dead in the freezer, chopped up or shot up. And it was unsolved. It was unsolved for years. And then I'm talking about people had given up hope. One of the murderers bragged to his girlfriend that he had done it like 20 years later, and I think he's in jail now. But anyway, so Palatine was in the news all the time. I was probably in my 20s, maybe it was more than 20 years ago, I don't know. But it was so I just remembered Palatine and the murders, but I've never been to Palatine. I don't live that far from it. It's probably maybe a 40-minute drive from where I live. But, they just like, well, Palatine's a good place. I asked a friend of mine, what's Palatine like? There's nothing there. You don't want to go there. It's just one of these non-suburban, so
it's a lot like Lathan, actually.
there's random elements that I work in because I want, people like you to significance of Lathan.
Well, I think there's actually I could sort of elaborate slightly on what David said there. This is just based on what David's told me, really. But what you said as well there, that these are places where nothing ever happens, and that's where Paulie is going to time and time again. He's living in this country, this world of hotel visits, going to places where they're famous for one thing. Maybe a murder happened there a long time ago, or someone who was once president 100 years ago left there and never came back, and that's the story of that place. And I think that's interesting. I don't know if David wants me to reveal this, but David lived, I think, for about 40 years in a suburb outside of Chicago, Riverside, which to me was like another one of those places. It's this I went there a couple of times. It's a completely anonymous suburb that, if you want to live in Chicago, you're going to hopefully live in Chicago. He's finally moved to Chicago recently, but he spent about 40 years in this suburb, sticking out like a sore thumb, living in this place. And I think that there's a sense of, I think David has, in creating Paulie, I think he wanted him to have visited places like the places you guys described. Coming from the UK, that's what I see anyway.
I completely agree, Julio. Riverside was a one-horse town. What I was doing there for 40 plus years, 41 years, is a mystery that will never be answered.
Speaking of creating Paulie, he had a very distinct personality. He seemed like a throwback to a character that might have appeared almost half a century ago, with the way he spoke. A whole lot of Yiddish phrases, right, just kind of like crammed into this. And then, so we got this character type. Oh, but he's an IT genius. And I'm just sort of wondering, obviously I don't want you to go too deeply into this, let people meet Paulie more or less on their own terms, but where did he come from roughly?
Well, he's a mixture of things that's in me, though he's not at all like me. What I would say about Paulie is this, that he says he's an IT person. He talks about having a wife who he's having trouble with, who roars at him in anger on the phone. He says he goes to a hospital to get sleeping pills, but really we don't know what, if anything, he is saying is true because we don't see any of it. We just have his reporting. And that, to me, that is like if you were to read all my plays, that occurs over and over again, which is, I meet people all the time who present themselves in a certain way. And I a lot of times wonder, are they really honestly? I mean, it could be, did they literally go to Florida, during the vacation? But more, it's like, are they actually who they say they are personally? And it's why I tend to be very selective about who I'm close friends with, because there's a lot of people out there that are just sort of devious and aren't being straight. And so that's more where the character came from. Now, in terms of the Yiddish, I wanted to make him kind of a nerdy character. I'm Jewish by heritage. I grew up in a family where some Yiddish was spoken. And his neurotic impulses, I guess that is a personal thing for me. Like when I go to a hotel, I like staying in hotels, but I'm very fussy and I'll look around. Where's the heat vent? I don't want it blowing on my head. And I've actually left hotel rooms because heat vent was blowing on my head. I look around, I check under the bed. I always look through the peephole to see what's out there. I mean, so I don't do direct autobiography in anything I've written, but there's parts of me in him, And one thing I want to just throw in tangentially related to the low budget. I don't think if we had $10 million, this film would have looked more or less the way it looks. We would have had more rehearsal time.
Mm.
We might have gotten a big star in it, but this film is not compromised because of the budget in any significant way. It's, and I can't speak for Julio, but when I wrote it, I wanted to do this internal cramped kind of world where things were not shown. Like we deliberately had no shots except for one brief one at the end that's outside.
Oh yeah.
So we didn't show the front of the hotel room, the front of the hotel. Sorry.
Yeah.
We didn't show cars going down the street. He didn't look. So it's very internal. Go ahead, Julio.
No, I was just sort of thinking about what you said, and the I think it comes back to with Paulie and let's say this, the fact this weird mix of, he has some IT knowledge, I think clearly, I think he has worked in IT. We discussed actually, David and I, whether he might have been fired, and he's actually just still pretending to his video camera on his laptop and to the audience, as it were, that he's still in tech, but he may have actually lost his job and be, on the outs. But the clash of his, these Yiddish words and the tech job is a kind of clash that's repeated throughout the film. That there is it's a clash of, the modern with the arcane and the hidden. And I just wanted to say a wider point based on what David was saying about the cramped style of the film, about the idea that we don't know what's, you can see through the peephole, but you can't, what's at the periphery of the vision through the peephole? What's on the door of, we've got room 508 and we can see in it, but what's behind the door of 510 that we occasionally see?
Yeah.
And I kind of work, David and I have got some differences in the way although we agree about a lot, we've got differences on we approach things. And, kind of thing I would always be saying to David when we were talking about things, and the kind of thing I really believe is that art is about the revelation of the hidden. It's about something which is hidden, and it's about pulling back the curtain on that hidden thing and allowing someone to look through. And in David's case, in David's world, in the world that we create together, it's then about pulling that curtain back so you don't quite see what it is, and that fires off your imagination, and that makes you look at things. And I think that the thing about Paulie is that, hopefully it makes you question, is everything he's telling us the truth? And what is this Jewish past in his life? Why this weird clash of things? And the only really thing that matters for me is it persuasive? You said you like the character, and so that's good. Maybe he works, but is he persuasive as a character? And I can think of meeting someone who's that guy works in tech, but he uses these Yiddish epithets all the time in a kind of a pretentious, self-conscious way, as if he heard them and then he made it a thing that he did. It's like a mask that he decided to put on and then it stuck. You know, he became this guy, this asshole who does this thing, and it's totally genuine for him now. But that's kind of the way I see him personally. Anyway.
No. Yeah. Paul is great. I guess I know you. This was recently at maybe a long distance festival, because I got the email about it a few weeks ago now. But I also was tipped off there's another festival this will be available for viewing.
Yeah, we've done a couple. So we were at another Hole in the Head Film Festival, San Francisco. We did Manchester Film Festival in March. And in May, we're at Philadelphia Independent Film Festival, and I think there's some online screenings for that planned. I'm still waiting to hear about everything to do with that, and then hopefully, but I think May 7th to the 15th, and maybe the online screening period will be longer. We're hoping that the film will be available worldwide to view for a very small fee. We imagine, during that period. We're planning to get the film distributed towards the end of the year, beginning of next year, but hopefully a few more festivals along the way, although nothing's for definite yet.
Okay, yeah, because I like to ask, because a reason we took the screener was it was a sort of after the fact of the Manchester one. I don't know when exactly that ended, but it's also we do have a number of readers in England, but we're mostly have a US based audience. But of course, with everything streaming these days of pandemic, that matters a whole lot less. So yeah, just wanted to make sure this could be available for
it should be available in May, and we'll certainly, as soon as we've got the exact link and details, we'll be sending those to you so that your readership can have access to it. It'll be an absolute delight. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I guess this brings me to my last question. I like to finish up all my interviews with filmmakers this way. If you could tell us what your hometown is, and then can you recommend a restaurant there?
David, you go first.
My hometown is Chicago, which, I lived in a suburb, as Julio mentioned, for a long time, but it was a near suburb. And I think Chicago is one of the greatest cities there is. And there are thousands of restaurants. One of the ones we really like is a place called Greek Islands. It's near the center of town, and we haven't been there since the pandemic started, but we will be going back as soon as it's safe, which hopefully will be soon.
Right.
My hometown now is London, and specifically Muswell Hill, which I think internationally is most famous because the Kinks came from Muswell Hill. And I think I would recommend a place called North and 10, which I go there every morning for a coffee, but you can get fantastic salt beef bagels. And although it's not strictly speaking a restaurant, I'm going to recommend that place. And if anyone watching this comes to Muswell Hill, I'll meet them outside North and 10 for a salt beef bagel or, vegetarian option. Anytime it's open, that's a guarantee.
I'm going for the beef.
Well, thank you.
Man needs meat.
I agree. Others disagree, and that's fine. Takes all sorts to make a world.
You bet.
Well, thank you both very much. It was absolutely a blast for me to talk with you two about your backgrounds and, of course, about Country of Hotels. And our review is going to be up, along with this interview, is going to be up soon. We might delay it for the festival release. I don't know yet, but this will definitely get up, and I'll be, in touch as appropriate. But thank you both again very much for giving me and giving 366 Weird Movies this time of yours.
But thanks for all that. Thank you for speaking for us for such a in such a detailed way. and for delving into the film in this way. It's been an absolute pleasure for me, and I can certainly say for David as well, I bet. Thank you very much.
And hopefully we can meet in the analog world soon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fingers crossed on that one.
I know.